The neon lights of Zeos's central trade district painted the megacity in garish colors, casting long shadows across the ultra-modern architecture of the Zenturi Empire. Towering spires of crystalline material stretched toward the twin moons, their surfaces reflecting the chaotic dance of commerce below. A cacophony of alien languages mingled with the constant hum of hover vehicles and street vendors hawking exotic wares. In this urban expanse, the Zenturi caste system was on full display. Noble Zenturi, their vibrant orange skin shimmering under the artificial lights, moved with practiced arrogance through walkways cleared specifically for them. The merchant caste, adorned in elaborate tunics of varying hues, signifying their commercial houses, conducted business with calculated precision. Below them, the worker caste, their orange skin dulled by labor and genetic modification, scurried about their tasks with downcast eyes. And at the bottom, humans, considered little more than useful vermin, struggled to survive in the margins of a society that viewed them with contempt. Elias Frost was one such human, a cargo skiff pilot with more debts than prospects. He navigated the crowded marketplace with the practiced wariness of prey. His tousled brown hair fell across ice-blue eyes that constantly scanned for opportunity or danger. His weathered gray jacket had seen better days, much like its owner, who had the look of a man perpetually gambling on luck that rarely materialized. Glancing at the holographic display on his wristband, Elias grimaced. 30 credits remained in his account, barely enough for a week's worth of synthetic protein paste after paying for his cramped sleeping pod in the lower Zeos district. He needed a score, and soon, or he'd be forced to take even riskier jobs from the kind of people who didn't tolerate failure. Just need one good run, he muttered to himself, fingers tapping nervously against his thigh. Something to get back on my feet. His gaze lingered on the status of his impounded cargo skiff. The Zenturi Port Authority had grounded it 3 weeks ago over unpaid docking fees and fuel taxes. Without it, he was planet-bound and rapidly running out of options, lost in the grim calculation of his finances. Elias failed to notice the sleek hover limousine gliding through the parting crowd until it was too late. His shoulder collided with the vehicle's polished exterior, the impact sending him stumbling backward. "Watch where you're," he began, but the words died in his throat as the limousine's door slid open. A female Zenturi emerged, her orange skin so vibrant it seemed to pulse with inner fire. Unlike the dull copper tones of the worker caste, her complexion resembled molten amber caught in sunlight. She wore a form-fitting black bodysuit, adorned with intricate silver patterns that accentuated her lithe frame. Her hair, a startling white reminiscent of moonlight, was styled in an elaborate series of braids that framed her delicate features. Her eyes, large and almond-shaped with vertical pupils, regarded Elias with a mixture of disdain and fascination. "A creature of your caste should not be near me," she said, her voice melodic despite the contempt in her words. She raised a slender hand, fingers adorned with rings of precious metals, in a gesture of prohibition. "Step back." The marketplace had grown quiet, observers watching the confrontation with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Interactions between nobles and humans rarely ended well for the latter. Elias swallowed his instinctive retort. "I apologize for the collision," he said instead, taking a measured step backward. "It was unintentional." The Zenturi female continued to stare at him, her expression inscrutable. Then, with a dismissive flick of her wrist, she turned to rejoin an older male Zenturi, waiting beside the limousine, presumably her father, judging by the familial markings on his formal attire. As she moved, something dislodged from a hidden compartment in her bodysuit, a small octagonal device of bluish metal that clattered to the ground between them. The object was no larger than Elias's palm, covered in intricate engravings that seemed to shift and move in the light. Before either could react, Elias instinctively bent down and retrieved it. The moment his fingers touched the object, a faint blue glow emanated from its surface, then quickly faded. The female Zenturi's eyes widened in alarm. She lunged forward as if to snatch it back, then froze, her gaze darting between Elias's face and the object in his hand. "Sunri, we must depart," called the older Zenturi. "The auction awaits." She hesitated, then fixed Elias with a glare of such intensity that he felt it like a physical force. "This is not over, human," she hissed, before turning abruptly and joining her father in the limousine. As the vehicle glided away, Elias examined the strange object in his palm. The engravings seemed to be some form of ancient Zenturi script, far more elaborate than the utilitarian writing he occasionally encountered in shipping manifests. "I should return this," he thought, knowing instinctively that the object was valuable, perhaps dangerously so. "Before I get into trouble," but even as he formed the thought, he slipped the device into his inner jacket pocket. Perhaps this was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. If nothing else, returning it might earn him a reward from the Zenturi female, Sunri, the older one had called her. Unbeknownst to Elias, his actions had not gone unnoticed. As Sunri's limousine disappeared into the flow of traffic, 3 figures in gray cloaks detached themselves from the shadows of a nearby alley. Their movements were too fluid, too predatory to be either human or standard Zenturi. These were Vexari, a subspecies known for their ruthlessness and complete devotion to their master, Lord Krell. "The keystone has been compromised," one whispered into a communication device. "Target is a human male, moving east through the market district." "Retrieve it," came the cold reply. "Eliminate witnesses." Elias sensed he was being watched even before he spotted the gray cloaks moving purposefully through the crowd in his direction. Years of operating in the margins of Zeos society had honed his survival instincts. Without breaking stride, he veered toward a food stall, pretending to examine the array of alien delicacies while keeping the approaching figures in his peripheral vision. 3 of them, moving with the coordinated precision that screamed professional. Not Port Authority. They lacked the pompous swagger of official enforcers. Something worse. Then, casually, he paid for a skewer of roasted fungi, then slipped into a narrow side alley between 2 massive architectural columns. The moment he was out of sight, he broke into a run, navigating the labyrinthine passages of Lower Zeos with the expertise of someone who had spent years mapping escape routes. The alley narrowed further, forcing him to turn sideways to squeeze through a gap between buildings. Neon light filtered down through ventilation shafts, casting alternating patterns of harsh illumination and deep shadow. The air was thick with the mingled aromas of exotic spices, industrial waste, and the distinctive musk of too many beings living in too small a space. He had just emerged into a slightly wider passage when a hand shot out from a recessed doorway, yanking him into darkness. Elias struggled against the iron grip until the cold muzzle of an energy pistol pressed against his temple. "Be still, human," a gravelly voice commanded. Elias froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. In the dim light, he could make out his captor's features, a male Zenturi, but unlike any he had seen before. The alien's orange skin had a rusted, weathered quality, and one of his eyes had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed faintly blue in the darkness. His face was a map of hardship, etched with lines of suffering and determination. "They're coming," the Zenturi whispered, his attention shifting to the alley beyond their hiding place. Moments later, the 3 gray-cloaked figures passed by, moving with eerie silence. The Zenturi's grip tightened on Elias until they had vanished around a corner. "Vexari," the Zenturi spat the word like a curse. "Krell's hunting dogs." He released Elias, though the energy pistol remained leveled at his chest. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, rubbing his arm where the Zenturi's fingers had dug in. "My name is Toran," the Zenturi replied. "A cultural preservationist, some would say." Others might use less flattering terms. His cybernetic eye whirred softly as it adjusted focus. But the real question, human, is what you're doing with a royal keystone in your pocket. Elias's hand instinctively moved to protect the octagonal device. How do you— I've been tracking that keystone for longer than you've been alive, Toran interrupted. Now the Vexari are hunting it too, which means we need to move. Unless you'd prefer to explain to Lord Krell's assassins why you stole from Sunri Zanturi, daughter of High Counselor Valen. The name dropped like a stone in Elias's stomach. High Counselor Valen, one of the 7 most powerful Zanturi in the Empire. No wonder the girl had looked at him like he was something scraped from the bottom of a waste processor. I didn't steal it, Elias protested. It fell, and I picked it up. I was going to return it. Toran's expression suggested he found this explanation lacking. Regardless of your intentions, you now possess something of immense value, one of 7 keystones that, together, unlock the Vault of Ascension. The what? The first temple, Toran clarified, though this meant nothing to Elias. A repository of knowledge from the Dawn era, before the great schism that separated our peoples. Elias shook his head in confusion. Our peoples were never united. Zanturi have always considered humans inferior. A bitter smile twisted Toran's features. History is written by those in power, human. What you believe to be eternal truth may be nothing more than a convenient fiction. He gestured toward a hidden door at the back of the alcove. Come. I know a place where we can speak more freely. Toran's safe place turned out to be a cramped apartment carved into the foundations of an ancient structure. The walls were lined with salvaged technology and artifacts that appeared to be of Zanturi origin. Though unlike any Elias had seen in commercial use, the keystone you carry belonged to the royal line of Sunri's family for 20 generations, Toran explained, activating a holographic display that showed the octagonal device rotating slowly in the air. It is one of 7 pieces that form the key to the Vault of Ascension, a temple built during the Dawn era, over 5,000 years ago. What's in this vault that makes it so valuable? Elias asked, watching the hologram with growing fascination. Truth, Toran replied simply. The truth about the relationship between humans and Zanturi before the Great Schism. A truth the High Council has worked tirelessly to erase. And this keystone can reveal this truth? Toran nodded. Each keystone contains memories, imprints of events from 5 millennia ago. Together, they can unlock the vault and restore what was lost. His cybernetic eye fixed on Elias with unsettling intensity. But even a single keystone can reveal glimpses of the past to those attuned to its resonance. Elias withdrew the device from his pocket, examining it with new appreciation. What had started as a potential source of quick credits was rapidly evolving into something far more complex and dangerous. The Vexari will not stop hunting you, Toran continued. Lord Krell has spent centuries ensuring that the truth remains buried. If you hope to survive, you must come with me to the ancient temple beneath Sios. There, we can activate the keystone and understand its significance before deciding how to proceed. And then what? I just return it to Sunri and hope she doesn't have me executed for touching her precious royal artifact? Toran's expression darkened. The fate of 2 species may rest on what we discover. Your personal survival, while understandably important to you, is secondary to that. Elias felt a flare of anger. Easy for you to say when it's not your neck on the line. My neck has been on the line for decades, Toran retorted, gesturing to his cybernetic implant. This was the High Council's reward for my curiosity about our shared past. The bitterness in the Zanturi's voice gave Elias pause. Whatever Toran's agenda, his animosity toward the ruling class seemed genuine. Fine, Elias said after a moment's consideration. I'll go with you to this temple, but afterward, I make my own decisions about what happens to the keystone. Toran studied him for a long moment before nodding. Agreed. Though I suspect what you learn may influence those decisions more than you anticipate. Their journey into the depths beneath Zeos began through a maintenance shaft in Toran's apartment floor. The passage quickly gave way to tunnels of ancient construction, their walls adorned with deteriorating friezes depicting scenes from Zanturi history. Or perhaps, Elias realized with growing unease, a history deliberately erased from public knowledge. The artificial lighting grew dimmer as they descended, replaced by bioluminescent fungi that cast an ethereal blue glow across the rough-hewn walls. Toran moved with the confidence of familiarity, occasionally stopping to examine markings or adjust their course. These passages were sealed by the High Council centuries ago, he explained, as they navigated a particularly narrow section. Most Zanturi don't even know they exist. Elias studied the carvings as they passed, noticing a recurring motif: figures that appeared to be human and Zanturi standing together, engaged in what looked like collaborative construction of a city. These images, he said, pointing to a particularly well-preserved section. They show humans and Zanturi working together. Toran nodded. The founding of Zeos, originally called Harmony in the Old Tongue. It was built by both species as a symbol of their alliance. That's not what they teach in the education centers, Elias remarked. No, Toran agreed grimly. It is not. They continued in silence, descending deeper into the forgotten infrastructure of the ancient city. The air grew colder, carrying the musty scent of undisturbed antiquity. Finally, the tunnel opened into a vast circular chamber with a dome ceiling so high that its apex disappeared into darkness. 7 pedestals were arranged in a perfect circle around a central dais, each bearing intricate carvings that matched the patterns on the keystone. The central platform featured a more complex design, 7 light rays emanating from a central point, forming what Toran called the Circle of Light. The symbol of the first night, he explained, voice hushed with reverence. First night? Elias echoed. A ritual of connection between our species that maintained peace for over 2,000 years, Toran said, before the Great Schism erased it from memory. Elias approached the central dais cautiously. And this keystone, it's meant to be placed here? Toran nodded. Each pedestal corresponds to one of the 7 keystones, but even a single stone placed on the central dais can activate the memory imprint it contains. Elias withdrew the octagonal device from his pocket. It seemed to pulse with faint energy, as though responding to the chamber's ambient power. What will happen if I place it there? He asked. A glimpse into the past, Toran replied. A fragment of truth that has been denied to both our peoples for millennia. Despite his apprehension, curiosity drove Elias forward. With careful deliberation, he placed the keystone on the central dais. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft blue light began to emanate from the device, growing in intensity until it illuminated the entire chamber. Lines of energy spread outward along channels carved into the floor, racing up the walls to converge at the apex of the dome. The air above the dais shimmered, coalescing into a 3-dimensional projection of startling clarity. In it, a human man and a Zanturi woman, clearly of noble lineage, stood before an altar, reminiscent of the central dais. They faced each other, hands clasped, surrounded by a mixed assembly of humans and Zanturi, who watched with expressions of solemn approval. Echoing voices filled the chamber, speaking in an ancient dialect that somehow resonated with meaning in Elias's mind. Through the rite of first night, we bind our peoples in harmony. What was sundered shall be joined. What was distant shall be near. Blood of earth and blood of Zeos, united in purpose and destiny. The scene shifted, showing thousands of humans and Zanturi working side by side to construct a magnificent city, the foundation of what would one day become Zeos. My God, Elias whispered, transfixed by the revelation unfolding before him. The holographic display flickered suddenly as a violent tremor shook the chamber. Dust and small fragments of stone rained down from the ceiling. "They found us," Toran hissed, drawing his energy pistol. "The Vexari must have tracked our descent." Another tremor, stronger than the first, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of demolition charges. "Take this." Toran pressed a Zanturi communication device into Elias's hand. "There's a secondary chamber below us. The access point is behind the third pedestal." He pushed Elias toward it. "Go now." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off," Toran said grimly. "The keystone is more important than either of us." Before Elias could protest, the chamber's entrance exploded inward in a shower of debris. 3 Vexari assassins emerged through the dust cloud, weapons raised. Toran opened fire immediately, his energy bolts forcing the intruders to take cover. "Go!" he shouted to Elias. "Find Sunri, complete the ritual, save both our species." Elias hesitated only a moment before racing toward the escape route Toran had indicated. Behind him, the sounds of combat intensified, energy weapons discharging, the crash of falling stonework, Toran's defiant shouts. He found the hidden passage and squeezed through. The keystone clutched tightly in his hand. The last thing he heard before the passage sealed behind him was Toran's agonized cry as the Vexari overwhelmed him. The tunnel descended steeply, forcing Elias to half climb, half slide down its rough surface. After what felt like an eternity, it opened into a cavernous space so vast that for a moment he thought he had somehow emerged onto the surface. But this was no exterior landscape. He stood on a broad ledge overlooking what appeared to be an ancient harbor carved from the bedrock beneath Zeus. Dozens of spacecraft of archaic design, their hulls resembling nautilus shells, rested in cradles of stone, undisturbed for centuries. Bioluminescent stalactites hung from the cavern ceiling, casting rippling patterns of light across the still waters of an underground lake. "Remarkable, isn't it?" came a voice from behind him. Elias spun around, nearly losing his balance on the ledge. Sunri Zanturi stood there, though she had exchanged her formal bodysuit for a flight suit that shifted colors like oil on water. Her white hair was now pulled back in a utilitarian style, and her expression had lost some of its earlier haughtiness, though wariness remained in her eyes. "How did you find me?" Elias demanded, instinctively backing away. "I felt the keystone's activation," she replied, taking a measured step forward. "It has been in my family's keeping for generations. Its resonance is familiar to me." Her gaze fixed on his pocket where the device was concealed. "Return it to me now, human." "My name is Elias Frost, not human," he corrected her, standing his ground. "And I don't think I will, considering your friends just killed someone trying to get it." Confusion flickered across her features. "My friends? I came alone." "The Vexari assassins," Elias clarified. "They seemed very interested in this keystone." Sunri's expression hardened. "The Vexari serve Lord Krell, not my family. If they're hunting the keystone, it's because Krell fears what it might reveal." She extended her hand. "All the more reason you should return it to its rightful guardian." Elias studied her, trying to gauge her sincerity. "How do I know you're not working with Krell?" A flash of genuine outrage crossed her face. "Lord Krell is a usurper who has corrupted the High Council for centuries. My family has safeguarded that keystone for 20 generations against his influence." Her voice lowered. "I could have brought the Royal Guard to take it from you by force. Instead, I came alone. That should tell you something about my intentions." "It tells me you don't necessarily want to kill me," Elias acknowledged. "But that's not the same as trusting you." Sunri's posture relaxed slightly. "Fair enough. Then perhaps we can reach an accommodation based on mutual need." She gestured to the ancient harbor below. "These vessels can take us beyond Zeus's atmosphere, to where the remaining keystones are hidden. I need to recover them before Krell does." "And you need me because—" Because the keystone responded to you, she said, a note of reluctance in her voice. It recognized something in you that resonates with its purpose. Without that resonance, the other keystones cannot be activated. Elias considered her words, remembering the blue glow that had emanated from the device when he first touched it. So you're saying I'm special somehow? I'm saying you're useful, Sunri corrected, though without her earlier contempt. And at the moment, we both want to escape the Vexari. I can provide transportation and knowledge of where to find the remaining keystones. You can provide the resonance needed to activate them. And once we have all 7, we open the Vault of Ascension and retrieve what was lost, she said simply. Elias weighed his options. Without Sunri's help, he wouldn't get far. The Vexari would hunt him down within hours. And despite his initial plan to simply return the keystone for a reward, what he had seen in the chamber above had kindled a burning curiosity about the true history between humans and Zenturi. I keep the keystone until we find the others, he stipulated. Then we open this vault together. Sunri's eyes narrowed, but after a moment's consideration, she nodded. Agreed, now come, we must hurry. She led him down a series of switchback stairs carved into the cavern wall, heading toward one of the nautilus-shaped vessels. As they reached the harbor floor, a distant explosion echoed through the cavern. The Vexari have breached the secondary entrance, Sunri said, increasing her pace. This way. Instead of the ancient vessels, she directed him toward a sleek shuttle bearing the insignia of the Zenturi royal house. The craft was clearly modern, its design a stark contrast to the archaic surroundings. You came prepared, Elias remarked, as the shuttle's entry ramp descended at Sunri's command. I've been preparing for this moment my entire life, she replied, gesturing him aboard. Though I never expected to be sharing it with a human, the shuttle's interior was luxurious by any standard, with contoured seating that adjusted automatically to Elias's physiology. Sunri took the pilot's position, her fingers dancing across holographic controls with practiced efficiency. Strap in, she advised as the engines hummed to life. This exit route isn't exactly regulation. The shuttle rose smoothly from the cavern floor, then accelerated toward what appeared to be a solid rock wall. Elias gripped his seat, certain they were about to crash, when a section of the wall shimmered and dissolved, a holographic disguise concealing a narrow passage. They shot through the opening into a larger tunnel that sloped sharply upward. Behind them, energy blasts from Vexari weapons struck the cavern walls, sending cascades of stone crashing down. They're mobilizing pursuit craft, Sunri announced, studying a tactical display. 2 Hunter-class vessels, heavily armed. The tunnel ended abruptly, opening into the night sky above Zeus. The city spread below them, a glittering expanse of towers and transit lanes. Sunri banked hard, sending the shuttle into a steep climb toward the upper atmosphere. Where are we going? Elias asked, fighting the G-forces that pressed him into his seat. The Shattered Belt, Sunri replied, referring to the ring of asteroids that orbited Zeus, remnants of a moon destroyed in some ancient cataclysm. There's a hidden outpost there where we can regroup. Warning indicators flashed across the control panel as the pursuing Vexari vessels gained on them. A streak of energy fire lanced past the viewport, missing them by meters. They're closing, Elias observed unnecessarily. Sunri's expression was grim. I see that. Another blast, closer this time, causing the shuttle to shudder. Let me fly, Elias said suddenly. Sunri shot him an incredulous look. This is a Royal Zenturi shuttle, not some cargo skiff. And those are Vexari hunter-killers, not Port Authority patrol boats, Elias countered. I'm a better pilot than you think. Another near miss emphasized his point. After a moment's hesitation, Sunri relinquished the controls. Elias took over, immediately dropping the shuttle into a steep dive that had Sunri grabbing for handholds. He leveled out just above the towers of Upper Zeus, weaving between the spires with reckless precision. "What are you doing?" Sunri demanded. "We need to reach orbit." "We will," Elias assured her, executing a tight turn that sent them hurtling between two massive transit hubs. "But first, we need to thin the competition." He pushed the shuttle to its structural limits, using the cityscape as cover. One of the pursuing vessels, attempting to match his maneuvers, miscalculated and clipped a communications array. It didn't explode so much as disintegrate, transformed in an instant from sleek predator to expanding cloud of debris. "One down," Elias noted with grim satisfaction, banking hard to avoid another energy blast from the remaining hunter. He pulled up sharply, the shuttle's engines straining as they climbed toward the stars once more. The Vexari vessel stayed with them, closing the distance with relentless determination. As they broke through the upper atmosphere into the blackness of space, the shattered belt came into view, a sprawling ring of asteroids ranging from boulder-sized fragments to chunks of rock larger than Zeus's remaining moon. "Direct approach is suicide," Sunri warned, as Elias aimed the shuttle toward the densest section of the belt. "The navigational hazards are exactly what we need," Elias finished for her. He reached into his pocket and placed the keystone on the control panel between them. "This showed me the path through the ancient temple. Let's see if it can do the same here." As if responding to his challenge, the keystone began to emit its soft blue glow. Tendrils of light spread across the control panel, interfacing with the shuttle's navigation system. On the main viewport, a safe trajectory through the asteroid field materialized, a winding path that would be invisible to normal sensors. "How did you know it would do that?" Sunri asked, unable to hide her amazement. Elias shrugged. "I didn't, but it seems to want to help us." He guided the shuttle into the belt, following the illuminated path. Behind them, the Vexari hunter hesitated at the edge of the asteroid field before plunging in after them. The passage was harrowing despite the keystone's guidance. Massive rocks tumbled around them in a silent, deadly ballet. Elias's hands moved constantly across the controls, making minute adjustments to avoid collision. The Vexari vessel was not so fortunate. Without the keystone's guidance, it strayed from the safe path. A rotating asteroid the size of a small building caught it a glancing blow, sending it spinning into the path of a larger fragment. The resulting explosion briefly illuminated the surrounding asteroids. "Your piloting skills are adequate," Sunri conceded, though there was a new respect in her voice. Elias glanced at her, caught for a moment by the way the blue light from the keystone played across her features, softening them. For the first time, he saw beyond the arrogant noble to the person beneath, determined, intelligent, and perhaps not as contemptuous of humans as she first appeared. Their gazes held for a heartbeat longer than necessary before Elias returned his attention to the controls. "The outpost is ahead," Sunri said, indicating a massive asteroid that dominated this section of the belt. "Land at the coordinates I'm sending to the navigation system." The keystone's glow intensified as they approached, the blue light spreading to encompass the entire cockpit. It illuminated a narrow fissure in the asteroid's surface, a hangar entrance camouflaged to appear as a natural feature. Elias guided the shuttle through the opening into a cavernous docking bay carved from the asteroid's interior. Several figures waited on the landing platform, their postures tense with anticipation. As the shuttle settled onto its landing struts and the engines cycled down, Sunri turned to Elias. "The people here have dedicated their lives to preserving the truth about our shared history. They will help us understand the keystone's significance and locate the others." She hesitated, then added, "But they may not all share my evolving perspective on humans." "You mean they might still see me as inferior?" Elias translated bluntly. Sunri didn't deny it. Centuries of conditioning are not easily overcome, but what matters is their commitment to the truth, whatever it reveals. As they disembarked, Elias was struck by the scale of the hidden facility. The docking bay opened into a larger complex carved throughout the asteroid, with ancient Xanturi architecture seamlessly integrated with modern technology. Holographic displays showed star charts and what appeared to be tracking data for the remaining keystones. An elderly Xanturi, with skin the color of burnished copper, stepped forward to greet them. His movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, and he wore robes of a style Elias had never seen before, more elaborate than those of the High Council, yet somehow more authentic. Sunri, daughter of Valen, the elder Xanturi acknowledged with a formal bow. You have brought us both the keystone and its resonator. The signs were true. Sunri returned the bow. Mentor Kalen, this is Elias Frost. He acquired the keystone and has agreed to help recover the others. Kalen turned his penetrating gaze on Elias. There was wisdom in those eyes, but also a wariness that spoke of long-held suspicions. The keystone responded to you, he stated, rather than asked. It recognized in you the echo of the first resonator, the human who stood with our ancestors at the founding of the Alliance. I don't understand, Elias admitted. What's a resonator? Kalen gestured for them to follow him deeper into the facility. Walk with me, and I will explain what few living beings in this system remember. They passed through corridors lined with artifacts that appeared to be from the Dawn era, sculptures, tablets, and devices whose purposes Elias could only guess at. Eventually, they entered a circular chamber reminiscent of the temple beneath Zeus, though smaller in scale. At its center stood a pedestal on which rested a second keystone, identical to the one Elias carried. For 5,000 years, I have been the guardian of this keystone, Kalen said, his voice reverent. Now the time has come for it to rejoin its siblings. He lifted the device and presented it to Sunri. You and the resonator must complete what was begun millennia ago. Sunri accepted the keystone with a formal bow. What is the rite of first night, Mentor? The archives speak of it only in fragments. It was the binding ritual that united our species, Kalen explained. A spiritual and physical communion between representative vessels, one human, one Xanturi, that symbolized and reinforced the alliance between our peoples. Elias frowned. You're saying humans and Xanturi, what, married each other? Not marriage as either culture now understands it, Kalen clarified. The rite of first night was a sacred bond, a sharing of essence that transcended physical form. It was performed by those who carried the ancestral resonance, individuals like yourselves, in whom the ancient connection still lives. Before either could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lighting replaced the standard illumination, casting harsh shadows across the chamber. We've been discovered, Kalen said, his expression grim. 2 vessels have entered the asteroid field, one bearing Vexari signatures, the other, the High Council cruiser. My father, Sunri whispered, her composure slipping momentarily. Kalen moved to a control panel embedded in the wall, his fingers flying across the interface. They're converging on our location. We have minutes at most. Can we evacuate? Elias asked. The elder Xanturi shook his head. Not all of us. But you two must continue. He pressed a sequence of commands, and a section of the floor slid aside, revealing a stairway descending into darkness. This leads to the inner sanctum, a chamber designed specifically for the ritual of the first night. Take both keystones there. What about you? Sunri demanded. I will delay them as long as possible, Kalen said with finality. What matters is that you complete the connection. Only then can the remaining keystones be called to join with these. The facility shuddered as the first impacts struck the asteroid's surface. Go, Kalen urged, pushing them toward the opening. The fate of both our peoples depends on what happens in that chamber. Reluctantly, Elias and Sunri descended the stairs as Kalen sealed the entrance behind them. The passage was narrow and steep, lit only by bioluminescent markings that pulsed with increasing intensity as they progressed deeper. The walls of the corridor were covered with friezes, depicting scenes from the Communion era. Humans and Zanturi living, working, and celebrating together. Unlike the deteriorating images in the tunnels beneath Zeus, these were preserved in pristine condition, their colors as vibrant as the day they were created. "I never imagined," Sunri murmured, trailing her fingers along a carving that showed a human and Zanturi standing together before an assembly, hands clasped in what was clearly the rite of first night ritual. Above them, the sounds of conflict intensified, energy weapons discharging, shouted commands, the crash of failing systems. "Kalen won't survive," Elias said grimly. "He's lived 5,000 years waiting for this moment," Sunri replied, her voice tight with emotion. "For my people, there is no greater honor than fulfilling one's purpose." They reached the bottom of the stairway and emerged into the inner sanctum, a perfect circular chamber with a high, domed ceiling inlaid with crystalline formations that caught and amplified the light. 7 pedestals surrounded a central altar, each bearing the name of one keystone in ancient Zanturi script. Sunri approached the second pedestal and carefully placed her keystone upon it. Immediately, blue light emanated from the device, racing along channels in the floor to connect with the central altar. "Your keystone belongs on the first pedestal," she instructed Elias. "Together, they will initiate the calling of the others." Elias hesitated, then placed his keystone as directed. Its light joined with Sunri's, the combined radiance filling the chamber with a pulsing azure glow. The crystalline formations in the ceiling began to resonate, producing a harmonious tone that seemed to vibrate through Elias's very bones. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the resonance. Sunri indicated the central altar. According to the ancient texts, the resonators must stand together at the heart of light to complete the circuit. They positioned themselves on opposite sides of the altar, facing each other across its glowing surface. The blue light intensified, surrounding them in a nimbus of energy that separated them from the rest of the chamber. "Join hands," Sunri instructed, extending her own across the altar. As their fingers intertwined, Elias felt a jolt of energy pass between them. Not painful, but intense enough to make him gasp. Sunri's eyes widened, suggesting she felt it too. "The rite of first night," she whispered. "It's more than a ritual of alliance. It's a bonding of souls." The realization hit Elias with the force of revelation. The holographic scene he had witnessed in the temple beneath Zeus hadn't been merely symbolic. It had depicted a genuine connection between representatives of two species. A connection that transcended physical differences to forge a spiritual unity. And now, 5 millennia later, that connection was reforming between him and Sunri. The chamber's entrance exploded inward before he could process the implications. Vexari assassins poured through the breach, weapons raised, followed by armored guards bearing the insignia of the High Council. At the same moment, 5 beams of blue light shot through the ceiling, bypassing the physical structure as though it were insubstantial. Each beam struck one of the empty pedestals, materializing into the remaining keystones. The completed circle of 7 keystones unleashed a pulse of energy that expanded outward in a concentric wave. It passed through Elias and Sunri without effect, but when it reached the intruders, they collapsed to their knees, clutching their heads as though in agony. One Vexari assassin, larger than the others and bearing command insignia, seemed particularly affected. As the energy wave washed over him, his gray skin began to peel away like a shedding snake, revealing the orange Zanturi hide beneath. "Lord Krell!" Sunri gasped in recognition. The disguise fully dissolved, exposing a Zanturi male whose orange skin had an unnatural, almost radioactive quality. his features contorted in rage and pain as memories long suppressed by genetic manipulation flooded back. "No!" he howled. "I erased it all! I rewrote history!" Behind him, a regal Zanturi in the formal attire of the High Council stepped through the ruined entrance. His resemblance to Sunri was unmistakable. High Counselor Valen had arrived personally. "Daughter," he said, his voice a mixture of confusion and awe as he surveyed the chamber and the 7 glowing keystones. "What have you done?" Sunri's grip on Elias's hands tightened. "What our ancestors always intended. Father, I've restored the truth." The blue energy continued to pulse outward, passing through the asteroid substance to spread across Gios and beyond. As it traveled, it carried with it the suppressed memories of the Communion era, the truth of the alliance between humans and Zenturi that had been erased from collective consciousness. Throughout the Zenturi Empire, beings of all castes suddenly remembered what had been taken from them. The artificial barriers of prejudice and division began to crumble as the original purpose of their society reasserted itself in the collective consciousness. In the inner sanctum, Lord Krell's facade had completely dissolved. The architect of the Great Schism knelt defeated, his millennia of deception undone in a single moment of truth. "Arrest him!" High Counselor Valen commanded, his own worldview visibly shifting as the blue energy worked its transformative power. "For crimes against both our peoples spanning 5,000 years." As the guards moved to comply, Sunri and Elias finally released their grip on each other. The nimbus of blue energy surrounding them faded, though a subtle connection remained, a thread of awareness linking them in ways neither fully understood yet. "The right of first night has been restored," Kalen announced from the shattered entrance. The elder Zanturi had survived the assault, though he leaned heavily on a staff and bore evidence of injury. "The Communion era begins anew." High Counselor Valen approached the central altar, his expression one of wonder tinged with lingering disbelief. "Is it true?" he asked Sunri. "Were humans and Zanturi truly equals?" "More than equals, Father," Sunri replied. "Partners, builders of a civilization greater than either could achieve alone." She gestured to the friezes depicting the original alliance. "This is our true heritage, not the artificial hierarchy Lord Krell created to control both species." Valen turned his attention to Elias, seeing him, truly seeing him, perhaps for the first time. "Then you, human, are more than you appear." "My name is Elias Frost," he corrected gently. "And I'm exactly what I appear to be, just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "You are the echo of the first resonator," Kalen interjected. "As Sunri is the echo of the first harmonizer. Your meeting was not chance, but destiny reasserting itself after millennia of disruption." The transformation of Zeos society did not occur overnight, but the events in the inner sanctum set in motion changes that would eventually reshape the Zenturi Empire. In the days that followed, Lord Krell was imprisoned for his crimes against both species. The Vexari, revealed to be genetically modified Zenturi, whose memories and DNA had been altered to serve as Krell's enforcers, began the long process of reclaiming their true identities. The High Council, under Valen's leadership, formally acknowledged the historical truth revealed by the Keystones. The ancient archives, sealed for millennia, were open to scholars of both species, and the full extent of the Communion era began to be understood once more. A month after the events in the asteroid belt, a formal ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of Zios. Sunri and Elias stood together before the 7 keystones, now displayed on their original pedestals, brought from the inner sanctum. "Today, we announce the formation of the Communion Council," Sunri proclaimed to the assembled dignitaries of both species. "A new governing body that will replace the High Council and restore the partnership between our peoples." Elias, dressed in formal attire that blended human and Zanturi design elements, continued. The caste system will be reformed. Status will be determined by merit and contribution, not by species or birth. The announcement was met with thunderous approval from the gathered assembly, particularly from the formerly lower castes, who had most to gain from the new order. High Counselor Valen, standing nearby, leaned close to his daughter. "I still struggle to reconcile what I believed all my life with what I now know to be true," he admitted quietly. "But I cannot deny the evidence of history, or the change I see in you." Sunri smiled, her gaze shifting briefly to Elias. "Change was inevitable, Father. The truth always finds a way." As the ceremony concluded, Elias was formally recognized as the echo of humanity, an ambassador for the renewed alliance. From a destitute cargo pilot scraping by on the margins of society, he had become a symbol of interspecies harmony. Sunri, meanwhile, was appointed co-chair of the Communion Council, working alongside her former adversaries to rebuild the bridges between their worlds. 5 years later, they stood together on the balcony of the new Communion Palace, watching Zeus's twin moons rise above the transformed cityscape. The megalopolis had changed dramatically, the stark divisions between Upper and Lower Zeus gradually dissolving as the reformed caste system took hold. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Elias asked, his arm around Sunri's waist. "If I hadn't bumped into your limousine that day in the market." Sunri leaned into his embrace, her hand resting protectively over her swollen abdomen, where the first human Zenturi child in 5 millennia grew. Kalen would say it was inevitable, that the Keystones would have found a way to bring us together regardless. "And what do you say?" She turned to face him, her once haughty features softened by years of partnership. "I say that some connections transcend time, space, and even species." Her fingers intertwined with his, echoing their position at the altar years before. The rite of first night bound not just us, but all who would follow. As if in response, a gentle kick from within her womb made them both smile. "A new era," Elias murmured, placing his free hand beside hers. "For both our peoples." The twin moons of Zeus cast their light over the city below, no longer divided, no longer built on artificial hierarchies, but slowly, steadily returning to the harmony of its founding. And in that light, the promise of the first night lived again. What was sundered, rejoined. What was distant, made near. Blood of earth and blood of Zeus, united once more in purpose and destiny.